Call this special meeting of City Council to order, December 28th, 2020, here at City Hall. Tonight we'll be have a discussion and possible decision regarding the engine and bond for power plant project. Okay.
What?
Hey, we're here.
Okay.
All right. So, discussion? Questions? Comments?
Bond.
Here, Larry, I'm gonna get you around here. They want to talk about the bond first.
Okay.
On this, does it increase our mill levy by doing a geo bond?
Well, you can pay for it however you want. I mean, if you want to pay for it out of electric revenues, rates, or other sources, if you have a sales tax. So you can raise your mill levy if you want, if you have other sources. The electric fund or wherever you want it, you can pay for it from that as well.
Okay, well,
Or it can be a combination.
we had done a new contract for our electricity, which saves us roughly 100 to 120,000 a year, and that's how we were looking at funding something if we done it that way.
Okay, you're skipping out a little bit. So you're saying you can you can pay for this with savings in the electric fund you're thinking?
Yes, yeah. That was my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we would, if we can avoid
Yeah, I
in the
can.
middle, but probably.
I don't know if you have the handout I sent Jamie earlier.
Yeah,
Basically, yeah, we could issue geo bonds for that, 10, 15, 20 years, however you want. I think Jamie had mentioned 10 years on page 7. Looks like you're looking at about 85,000 a year. And yeah, we take bids on the bonds. Right now, these are kind of conservative estimates for interest rates. It would probably be a little bit lower, so your payment might be slightly lower, but just kind of as a general estimate here. On the front page, I kind of outlined 10 years, about 85,000. 15 years could be about 63,000.
do you think those interest rates are gonna be lower than that? Or are we looking
Yeah,
at?
I mean, we've seen some good interest rates. Let's see, for example, I'd rather err on the side of caution here, but yeah, I mean, we've seen interest rates, I'm looking on page 7, typically they increase as you go further out, but I have 1.5%. It actually might be lower for that in the first year. I've seen some around 0.7%. And then out in the 10th year, 2031, it might actually be around 2% or so. So your average rate could be far lower than the 2.5% average guesstimated there. But yeah, so the way we do it, we would take bids from various underwriters and banks, and on the day of one of your upcoming meetings, and then we'd have the best bid for you to approve, the lowest interest rate. But if you want to proceed with that, we want to know if you want to look at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and then we can structure the bond sale documents to that. Normally we would decide that at maybe an upcoming meeting next week or 3 weeks from now, whenever you want to meet, nail that down, and then I'd come back a month later and with bids from various banks and underwriters, the final interest rates, and you can approve the bond ordinance at that time, lock things in. On page 8, the last page, I just have a simple calendar there. If you were wanting to, I don't know how soon you're wanting money to finance this. Do you have a timeline?
We have
be
to
ready to buy
decide
as soon
if
as
we want
possible.
to do it first.
Yeah, yeah. We don't really have a timeline.
So, yeah, I mean, this is, on page 8, if we had a sale resolution, nailed down the structure of the bond for the 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Next, early in the January. In February, we could have the bond sale. Documents would be finalized, and then the money would be at the city toward mid to late February.
Do you guys have any more questions regarding the bond right now?
So basically, the interest rates are an estimate right now. Best case scenario, they would be less than that.
Right. I mean, so we're a financial advisor. We take bids from all underwriters, and right now, we're seeing interest rates that are slightly better than this in the market right now.
How likely do you think it will that we'll be able to maybe get under 1 to at least start? I mean, you said 0.7, right? Possibly. I mean, you've seen some of that.
Yeah, I can actually pull up some recent bond sales and email you, or we can discuss it at a later meeting.
Okay.
But, yeah, we had Liberal most recently. I'm trying to think of a smaller city. We had Udall coming up in about a week or two. So we can look at what those rates would be. But yeah, I mean, I would expect it, 10-year instead of 2.5%, it might actually be closer to 1.8, 1.9. But again, it just depends on the day of sale. Typically, smaller issues like this, 750,000, may or may not attract as many bidders as for example, a Liberal $2 million or $3 million deal. So it just kind of depends on the day of sale, how hungry bidders are, and what their interest rates are. So it's hard to predict, especially with a smaller deal like this.
Does the debt capacity and some of those factors, does that come into play?
Yeah, I think your debt's still looking good though, but I mean, if you had high debt, that could scare some bidders away.
Okay.
I think that you have no outstanding debt, it looks like, at the moment. So, and this would actually be exempt from the debt limit. State law limits you how much debt you can issue to 30% of your valuation. But a lot of debt is exempt from that debt limit, including debt for electric projects. So this wouldn't even count against your state law debt limit of 30%.
You good on the bond?
I think so.
Larry, I think that's all they have on that. If you want to get off, and if they end up having anything else, I can get a hold of you and give you an update tomorrow.
Great, sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get my hotspot off. Jeff, I'll let you take it.
First, I'll introduce these guys to you. I don't think anybody knows them. This guy here is Cliff Gamblin. He's from Foley Caterpillar. And this is Mike Smotter from Mid-States, which is now part of KMEA. Mike's the engineer from Mid-States. He's also the owner, one of the owners. And they've been working on stuff for us since I came to work here in 1980. So he's very familiar with what's inside the plant and what it takes to kind of get us where we think we ought to be going. Without, it's not one of them deals where you hire the lowest bidder and he shows up and you destroy half of what you got. These guys, they've got all the blueprints for everything we've done in the last 40 years. So anyway, I'll I'll let Cliff go first. He can kind of explain to you kind of what we're looking at and about where we're at and what kind of a time frame and that, and then Mike can kind of fill you in with the rest of it. So.
Like I said, Cliff Gamblin, I've been with Foley 15 years. Mike and I have done 3 or 4 different power plants, municipal power plants. Most recently was the city of Colby, large unit that we put in there. Jeff and I have been talking about this for quite some time. Older equipment, trying to get things updated so that it's a little easier situation to keep the lights on when there's an outage of the utility. The used market is probably the best route to go so that we've got less air permit issues and things of that nature. And also it's a lot more financially feasible with the used equipment. So I've found some equipment that we can get our hands on that fits what we're looking for as far as size and voltage and things like that. We will have some fabrication of things to make it fit where we're trying to put it, but that's what we deal with all the time. So with that, we would have I believe it's a 1999 CAT 1825 kW unit, and then we would fabricate the radiator to be mounted outside. The engine would be mounted inside the facility, and then Mike's guys would take the electrical conductors and get them into the breaker that's needed. And then I would hire Farabee Mechanical to come in and set the muffler, do the piping, all the mechanical work to make it, get the coolant to the radiator outside and stuff like that.
Farabee is the same company that we had do the upgrades on the exhaust when I first came back. So
yeah,
they're fairly familiar with what's in there too. So
yeah.
and they're very quality minded. I mean, they're very particular about what they do. So
yeah. Other than that, it's a fairly simple part on my behalf. I know Mike and I work together on the control side to make sure that what we're doing all communicates well. One thing I want to point out is, like I said, on aging equipment, the ease of getting stuff online. You know, at Colby and at Johnson, the last ones that we did, we had my marketing gal was down here doing videos and stuff, and she actually took the whole city off utility and put it on the generators. So if somebody in a normal office situation can operate and get things online, then I'm comfortable that whoever's in that position within the city can do that as well. Because right now it's kind of a cat and mouse game with getting stuff online, and there's a particular way that you got to do it, but you also have to have some understanding of how things work to make sure that it continues to operate the way it's supposed to. So, your turn.
Yeah. Well, to clarify, I've only been with Mid-State since '98, not since 1980.
Yeah, well, we've been using Mid-State since 1980. Mike was just a pup then.
Yeah, actually, Mid-States has been around since 1954, and doing the same thing for mostly municipals, doing substation work and power plant work all over the state. Cliff Metson, Johnson City, and Colby, but we work in the southeast corner and the northeast corner as well. And that's all we do. And we've done a couple together. Cliff's partner, Don, is putting a unit in at Stockton. We'll be hooking it up there too as well.
You'll be hooking up you'll be hooking your side of everything up there too?
Yeah, we're doing the electrical, the cables, the power cables coming out of the engine, the controls. In this proposal, we've also put to upgrade the controls on 2 of the engines there so that they would play together better. Mm-hmm. They can do what we call load sharing, to where they share the load proportionally based on the size of their engines, and they actually talk together. The controls talk together instead of having to have a person tweak everything. So it's a lot more automated than what you have now. And we've also got some relay upgrades in there, and your PLC is older than, I don't know how old it is, but it's old. Just some of the other control equipment in the plant is dated.
Is the PLC in what's in the room?
It's what runs that Caterpillar at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It also talks to the relays and records data off of each one of your feeders.
Right.
And I was pointing out to Jeff, those trans data meters you have in there are, they're obsolete if anything fails on them.
Right.
And we're now using a product made by Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, SCL is what they're called. They're the state-of-the-art relays. They do the relaying, the metering, and they'll talk to the PLC, and one box will replace not only the meter in the front, but all the relaying in the back.
Right.
And it captures, it keeps a history on it, so when something happens, you can go back in time and see on the exact date and time what happened, and it's just a lot better for troubleshooting.
So this option is really good just for the mere fact of our aging equipment, but also
I hate
getting,
to call it Jeff's wish list, but that's kind of what it is.
but it also makes it easier, like Jeff keeps saying, I will be able to go down there and turn on the power if I need to. It not only helps.
It's a little bit tricky.
Well, I watched him do it without whatever might happen, and it's an interesting process, I will say that.
There's a huge difference between, like in Johnson City and Colby, we set up a screen that literally has a start and stop button to where you start and stop the generator and you can type in the number you want to load it to. Compared to the OP down there, that there's probably 30 steps to getting it online.
So what made you come to the decision of what you proposed
Just the history of what we've used on
on what we
places.
need?
So by adding an engine and putting both cats, the other two engines down there would have to be, if we needed them, would have to be started by someone and
Yes.
put online.
Correct. There is in the proposal putting electronic governor on the OP, which once it's started and online, it would share with the other engines. But it doesn't automatically start
Right.
and automatically synchronize.
But if we had a power outage with all this new equipment, by the time they got there, those engines would be running,
We could do it that way.
or they would have to, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it something that'll automatically kick on?
Well, we don't want to automatically kick it on and start feeding power into the town until people.
But I didn't know if it
No,
would, right, I didn't know if it would go ahead and fire the engines, have them running.
We could do that, and we have done that. There's not, I mean, they start in 30 seconds, so.
Right.
The difference between them running when you walk in the door and running 30 seconds after you push the button isn't a huge deal.
Right, okay.
There is a point where it's nice to have a human go, yes, it's safe to turn this thing on.
Yeah,
Especially when you talk about powering up the city.
right.
Somebody still has to be there to open the breakers, regardless. I mean, so, and like you said, this cat, it's done to where you can bring it up on the screen and start it, as soon as you walk in the door. I mean, it's just
The reason
too
I asked
small
is
to try and
because
load it that way.
apparently Stafford's is supposed to be set up that if they have a blackout, their generators come on and it'll put stuff back online. But they've never tested it, they've never tried it.
We have set them up to where it will trip all the feeders off, so you're not powering the city.
Right.
And just light up the power plant. And we did that in Johnson City, but nobody was ever brave enough to let us test it.
Right.
They didn't want to do the
They
middle of
didn't
the night
want to
outage.
trip Yeah.
Because it's scheduling a physical outage in the middle of the night to turn the power off and
Right.
see if everything works right.
Not everybody has the same outlook on that as we do.
I mean, if you're paying for something, I would definitely want to know that if that's how the route you went, that it works,
And with the equipment you have, that step between walking in the door and pushing the button and having it trip the feeders and start itself is just a minor step.
Right.
It's really down to programming and a little bit of wiring at that point.
Do you see a lot of smaller towns and stuff that have their own generation going to stuff like this? I mean,
We're seeing quite a bit of interest in automating as the older people move on. And I mean, it's a fact. I mean,
It's the truth.
everybody's facing it. As you hire new younger people, they're just hard to hang on to. They're wanting to move to the big city. Even in Salina, we have this problem. You know, they want to go to Dallas or Kansas City. And to have somebody that's been there for 30 years and knows that equipment inside and out, it's hard to do anymore. So we are seeing interest in more automation so that there's less to watch and less thinking, more safeties. You know, if the thing starts leaking oil and loses oil pressure and shuts itself down.
We were talking a little bit ago that one of the aspects of doing it this way is the fact that you won't have to keep somebody around that really needs to know a lot about what goes on in there. Because you can start those, put your circuits back on, and you can put your linemen out in the field to work. They don't have to stay in there. They'll run by themselves. So, you know, from that aspect, it will probably, in the long run, I mean, I hate to see another guy's job eliminated, but you've got linemen that are a whole lot easier to pick up than guys that do what I've been taught to do. And the guys that I have now, I just, and I shouldn't say this, I guess, but I'm just not sure they're capable of doing it. I've had a lot of years of class, you know, of running 70, 80 days of summer and stuff like that, and been around them. Well, the OP I've been around said, I helped dig the pit for it with shovels and a wheelbarrow. So, and the Caterpillar, we put it in 2002. I was here for all that, you know. But, you know, the days of guys being trained to run that stuff are just getting pretty rare anymore.
They also don't get to practice like they used to.
No. And if you're doing that, you're not getting something else done. You know, you hold 2 or 3 guys down there for a day a week for 6 months to teach them. You just lost that many days and how much have they absorbed? It's you have to do it. It's a repetition deal. I mean, I've done it hundreds of times, but they'd have to do it hundreds of times. And then those kind of things might not happen for a long, long time. And then all at once they have a fault of some sort, you know. And
you used to have contracts where you had to get off the grid so many hours every summer, and you just don't have to do that anymore. So they don't even get that practice.
Yeah.
On that last bid, that extra $8,000, was that to upgrade that OP once you got it
I
started?
think it was to upgrade some relays, wasn't it?
Extra 8.
Or maybe that was,
The last note that you sent me, you had something on the very end of it that said that you guys had talked.
update to digital voltage regulators.
Regulators, that's what it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to just get, I don't know for sure exactly what regulators in the old cat that's in there now. And plus with these new controllers, with everything talking, it would be beneficial to get it all on the same platform. And then that way there's no issues of how quick this one reacts to how quick the other one reacts.
Right.
Keep everything on an even playing field.
The city of Johnson is 1,300. I just looked it up. I didn't know how many people they had, so they are a small.
Same.
How many?
As of 18, it said about 13,000
13.
or 1,300. I'm sorry.
I knew they weren't a lot bigger than we were.
Fairly small.
Yeah, their loads are similar.
They got 5 circuits over there.
5 or 6.
We have 5.
You got 5 here.
Yeah.
But you peak at 3.2 and they're right at that.
Yeah. Between 32 and 33 usually.
Yeah.
Somewhere close.
So their load's about
Yeah.
very similar.
Yeah.
Well, what do they have out there at their plant? I mean, do they have 3, 4 engines? What?
There's 2 engines there now.
2?
We pulled 8 units, or they mothballed them. We didn't pull them out of the plant, but put in 2 cats. Those are brand new Tier 4 final units. And those they're 3 megawatts each. And so they've got 2 units there running.
And they're a little more expensive.
Yeah. 3
Yeah.
meg a piece.
3 meg at, yeah, very expensive. It was, that project ended up being, I think, 3.5 million. think, for that.
Boy.
So
they mothballed everything else they had then? And just,
it's quote unquote a museum. But they're leaving them in there and
Yeah.
drain the cooling tower. Well, I don't even know if they did that. They were talking at one time to maybe even utilize that for some heat, some station heat.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't, so.
Yeah, we pulled all the generator leads out so
They can't create energy now, but.
That was a KDHA thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And that was a little different project. We put those units in their own container outside, so they're not in the building. Which, for that, it was just much easier with the Tier 4. There's a lot more muffler and catalyst controls and very temperature sensitive items. So it was easier to design it that way than redesign the building and make sure we had enough airflow.
So is that design out there basically what we would be, same principle that we're looking at doing with our 2 engines?
On the control side, it would be.
On the control side,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Emissions wise, yours would be Tier 2 and theirs are Tier 4.
Yep.
You're more limited on the number of hours you can run.
Right.
And we would set the new engine on the on the south side of the plant, right?
Well, where we took that old number 3 engine out.
Where that old one come out.
Well, the conduit's in the pit, there's a walkway pit all the way around the south half of that power plant. At one time, went down through the middle in between where the Caterpillar and that OP sat and went all the way around and clear down the south wall. And when we took that number 1 and number 2 engine out before we put the Caterpillar in, while we poured part of that back to concrete to make it easier to clean and mop and that stuff, and got the floor smoothed up. But we left everything south of that engine, south of that Caterpillar engine, with that, basically it's just a tray, I guess. It's 3 foot wide or 3.5 foot wide and about 4 foot deep, where all the heat exchangers and all the piping and all that stuff off the other engines laid down in there. The fuel lines are in there, air lines are in there, conduits, all that stuff. And when we took that number 3 engine out, we had just put the new switchgear in the plant. It was in '94. And we ran that engine, I think, an hour, maybe 2. And then it was using so much oil that they shut it down. But it was already plumbed into the new building. The breaker's already there, the conduit's there. All we gotta do is cut the conduit off, tie onto it to be able to feed it back into the switchgear. And it's built into the console. It's already there too, so. Fuel line in the floor, all that stuff. But the stuff would have to come out and go out the south side of the building, which that's what we were looking at. I wasn't paying attention at the time, was that we still have the hole in the wall where the old exhaust went through, and we think we can hit it with the exhaust and take it out, and that'll let us scoot the radiator, because the radiators are gonna have to face each other. So we scoot the radiator back as far to the east as we can and cut down on the output heat, where we may have to build a funnel to kind of kick them up so that they don't blow into each other, get each other hot, but they'll be 30 feet apart, So it just makes it that much easier, and the concrete's already there. Everything's there. And then the piping for the radiator, it can go through the top of one of those round top windows. We can brick the window in or put a smaller window in it, brick around it or whatever, it's just, I told them guys, I said, really, it's probably in the top 10% of easy installs to do, because everything's right there from before. So the fuel and that stuff, we won't have to, when Cliff and I were talking, we don't have to put a what we call a day tank in front of it, because we got fuel right there in the floor and the fuel pressure's there. So that saves us just another headache of something else to wire and something else to keep an eye on. So you just meter your fuel and go that way. So it's really, a jackhammer in an afternoon, we can have that floor peeled out and ready to pour base in. It'll sit on top of the original base that was there. So.
I take take a little longer than an afternoon.
I can do it in the afternoon. I'll have it out, you can clean it up.
Okay, council, thoughts?
So adding this engine, it's not so much that we can't carry the load with the engines that we have down there, the generators. It's making it easier, more accessible to turn it on. Is that more of the?
It'll make it easier, and I think it'll make it more dependable. Because starting the OP and starting that Cooper are very involved.
Very involved.
Would we have enough with the 2 cats and the OP that we wouldn't have to run that Cooper? We could carry the load that we needed to with the city?
We can carry it now, except on a really, really hot day. You know, we're really close. We're within, you know, we bought that 500. We would have to, between that engine that they're proposing and that cat that we have, it would pull on full load about 3,300 kW, and we usually run 31 to 32. Sometimes we'll hit 33, but not for very long.
That would be with the 2 of them?
In the summer,
cats.
yeah, in the summer, in the hottest day in the summer.
And then you'd always have the OP for a backup?
Yes, and it still would have to be started and run, but you know, the other advantage to doing this way and upgrading this is that, like we were talking earlier, the first engine's not hard to put on. It's the one that you put on with it so that they can run together. That's where you need a little bit of time to learn that. So, you know, with this being electronically controlled, then you've basically cut down the chances of you having any mistakes. And with everything being controlled electronically, even if you put an electronic governor on that OP, then you've solved that problem too. Because then you just load it the way you want to load it. But by the same token, you won't slam another engine and take it down or lose your tie in the process. It will work like pouring water in a bucket from 3 sides. I mean, it'll all mesh right together and run the way that it's supposed to run. It's something that, you know, you'd spend half your day fiddling with that stuff, keeping your power factor right, your voltage right. I mean, it just is, it takes a little bit of practice to learn it, it really does.
So if we lost power right now and had this all in there, the only 2 that we'd really have to start would be the 2 cat engines?
You get them down there and get them lit, you'd have your lights back on in 5 minutes.
And then if a person needed to, they could start that other engine, and once you have it started.
Yeah, sure, you can take one of the others off, you can do whatever. Yeah.
Or if you needed it, you could run all 3 together.
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
you would basically, once it's running, I'm gonna say this, throw a switch and it would pick it up and phase it in with the other 2.
Yeah.
Right.
You'd have to take one of them off because you'd have too much. I mean, that's the thing, you'd be lugging your engine so bad that that's where you have to figure out the percentage of what you're gonna load it, and then balance those that way to where you can take the engine that that you can load at least 60-70% on there, so you get the efficiency out of the fuel that you're burning. Takes the same amount at 60% as it does at 100. So makes the cost of your kilowatts go down when you can get them up there where you're burning at the top 85, 90, 95%. Just makes your cost per kilowatt a whole lot cheaper on diesel.
Your catalysts work better too, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and they're kind of funny about that. They have a temperature range that they have to work in, and you have to, every time we do that, we have to record the temperature on that exhaust from start to finish. And then we have to give that to the state. They call for them a lot of times once a year. We have a lady that comes around and she takes a copy of all of those. There's a certain margin in there that you have to keep so that you get the efficiency out of the, basically it's just a
EPA stuff.
Yeah, well, it's just a catalytic converter, just like it is on your car. I mean, it's the same thing, They want the efficiency out of those, and they want them burned clean. And if they don't burn clean, they'll plug up, and then you do have problems. Then you spend your summers or your winters taking them out and hauling them someplace like to Tulsa to have them cleaned, and it's fairly expensive to do. We try to keep them up there to where we can keep the heat in that exhaust so that we keep it burned up. We don't have that problem. Because it'll really mess with you if you don't, so.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but these are digital control panels?
The new ones would be.
New ones would be?
Yes.
Okay. What are the potential pitfalls and problems that come with this right here? Are there any?
Technology.
Well, besides technology, yeah, everything falters.
There's always the, well, Jeff mentioned that, as your workforce becomes less experienced, they don't have the knowledge to work on the units, but as when you start putting the CAT engines in, for example, you're going to use the CAT mechanic more often than doing it yourself, because one, there's things that only they can do, and there's stuff that your people won't be able to do.
I don't think we've ever had that CAT worked on. We don't know enough about it really to work on it very much. And I mean, these guys, that's what they do, so.
Even like the fancy voltage regulator he's talking about, if it goes bad, you need a CAT tech to do it.
Right.
We can't do that. In the past, on Fairbanks, we changed the voltage regulator out and set it in, but.
Okay.
So you do get into some of that as it gets more specialized.
Right.
And then the actual controller itself that is going to talk between all of the units is a product that's used, I'd say 75% of all synchronizing controls are Woodward governor controls, and that's what this product is. And it's a very slick, high-end electrical device. So your other units have Woodwards on them, but they're old mechanical governors and flyweights and different things like that, mechanical. Now it's all done electronically.
Right.
And so
I mean, if you know what you're doing, you can take the old Fairbanks and put a wrench on it and turn the fuel valve and run it manually. You won't be able to do that with new stuff.
Okay. Right.
You can run her by the seat of your pants if you have to.
It's like I can work on an old 68 Chevy pickup, but I'm not working on my new pickup.
Yeah.
It's going to dealer.
If this is something we do, I mean, do you guys, like our employees, do you train them on running this equipment? I
We'll
mean,
show them how to do it.
if Jeff's gone and Jason's gone and they have questions, I mean, you guys got support for.
I carry 3 phone numbers in my phone, and I can call him at 3 o'clock in the morning if I have to. And I have several times. I've called the guy I've called his partner out of bed a couple times at 3 in the morning.
Right.
But I've never had the time they wouldn't talk to me.
Good.
I mean, this is what they do, and this is all they do.
Right.
So.
This is getting a little harder to get a hold of.
It's getting like me. I want to lose my phone a little more often than I do. That's a problem.
Yeah, he's only 2 days younger than you.
I know.
So much to look forward to.
Oh, yeah. You gotta love it.
But they want to keep this going too. They sold out this last summer to Kansas Municipal Energy. We are a member of Kansas Municipal Energy Agency, and Mike has a son that's just out of college. It's pretty sharp. Then they can just keep this thing going. I mean, it's the same people. It's just a different name.
Right.
But we've trusted these guys to do a lot of things in there over the years.
Right.
And we've never once not been glad we did.
Right.
And I know of places just like Stafford that's had nothing but grief.
Well, it's always good to have some continuity with all of this.
Well, they know the inside of our plant and we know them. I mean, and it's just, we don't call anybody else.
Right.
So.
Well, Jeff makes a good point too. You are part owner in our business now.
Right. Very good. Okay, council, what do you think?
Other questions?
Yeah.
Can't think of anything right now.
Nobody's got any questions? Nobody's got any comments, concerns, nothing?
I have, you talked about Johnson, or the city of Johnson, what they did, to me seems like it was pretty extreme, like on a scale of 1 to 10, would they be kind of at the 10 of being able to upgrade and
Maybe an 8.5.
8.5? So on that same scale, what would we be looking at that you have recommended for us?
6,
Okay.
maybe. Johnson City's always seemed to have money. I don't know where it comes from, but
Right. Well,
I know there's a lot of oil out there.
Yeah, it definitely happens. I mean. So, I mean, if you guys don't even, but like, what would a 4 look like? You get what I'm trying to ask? I mean,
Right.
like, would it be beneficial, like, would it be beneficial to not do any of it? Like, I mean, I know you're the salesperson, but,
I'm not really a salesperson. Cliff is good. The only thing I have in my proposal, and we could leave it for last, and if things are getting a little expensive, we could drop it out. There's about $30,000 worth of metering in there. Some of it I would want to do because it's never cheaper to do it than when you got things torn apart, but the actual meters themselves is a requirement of SPP, but Midwest Energy's never made any of their customers do it. Some have done it, but they've never made them do it. So we could leave that for last, and we could always leave that out.
I think that was something we discussed probably 3.5 or 4 years ago.
Just come up.
Yeah, it was. It was about 125,000 to do that at that time. Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah, I
Because
think it was before any of
something
these guys were
that-
on
It was
there.
something that Midwest had wanted us to do.
Yeah.
I think at the time we,
Well, they want you to track every kilowatt that you make, you know,
Well,
and you'd
and
be
will
able to
that-
prove them too. That's the thing.
well, that metering, if that meter was in there, would that obviously help us for our federal reporting that we have to do?
Oh, by far.
Yeah.
By far, yeah.
There
Yeah, and
is-
that gets more complicated by the year. I mean, the paperwork is just horrendous anymore for that stuff. And Jamie can tell you I'm not very good at it, and sometimes it's a hair pulling deal. So, you know, some of these meters, I mean, all these meters were put in '94 when we upgraded to switchgear and that stuff, but the engines on the meters were strictly mechanical meters at that time. And, well, the old, what we call cyclometer meters, I mean, they look like a clock face, you know, that's the way that they count their kilowatts. But, you know, I would have to maybe argue Mike's point a little bit. To me, it's not that extreme to upgrade this at this point because you still have the stability, you know, providing I can get that old Cooper running again. You've still got the stability of one other engine that you've paid for, and in 40 years it has maybe 1,600 hours on it. I mean, you know, we ran most of it till the late 90s, and then after that, then when we started buying it, when the wholesale deal started changing, and then we quit generating. You know, we were generating 70 days a year before that, but, you know, so you have 2 engines at this point that still have a lot of life left in them. But when they run, they need to run loaded. They're not like your car. You don't stick your foot in your car and run it wide open, but with these engines, they run better at 90% than they do at 50. I mean, they just do. The heat's better on them, it's leveled out, it runs better. You know, these engines are designed to set and run for hours and hours and hours on end. And the ability to be able to me, the ability to be able to start those and put them on and get the lights back on in your whole system and then just put your line crew out to fixing what's left is worth quite a bit because you don't have to have anybody in there. I mean, they run all over the world this way, you know. Caterpillar and Woodward Governor, and they're all worldwide companies that have been doing this for, you know, probably 30 years now. But, you know, it keeps you from having to try and teach somebody the same things that have taken me almost 40 years to learn. Because they never will. They just won't. It's just a fact of life. There's just no way that they can absorb. We ran 65, 70 days a year, you know. And then plus, and at that time we had a lot more faults. We might go on in the dark a dozen times a year, and we just don't anymore. I mean, the equipment, the power line, the equipment, everything is just so much better than it was 30 years ago. But you know, it's just, I think it's the stability of being able to take care of your customers and know that 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road that you can still supply a grocery store. You can supply a lot of things that if you can't get that engine started sooner or later, to me, and it makes no difference to me what you do, but to me, for my kids and my grandkids growing up here, I think they'd like to know that, you know, they've paid, and we haven't raised our rates in all of this, that they're paying a fairly high rate, but by the same token, they know that when the lights go off, they come back on. I don't think we've ever had a time in 100 years we didn't have your lights back on in 20 minutes. Including several times in the early 80s when we'd lose our tie for 12 or 13 days, and we'd run it 24 hours a day. So, you know, I grew up over at Belpre and in Maxwell, and in 1972 or 3, we lost school for 17 days because we didn't have a power line, because the ice took it down. We lost ours about 20 minutes. I mean, you know, it's just, I mean, it costs more to do that, but by the same token, the advantage of being able to do that rate's pretty high on a guy's list. You don't have, you know, we have 2 care homes, neither one of them has any kind of standby. You know, my mother, she's passed on now, but you know, I'd hate seeing what it was like if we couldn't get the lights back on. You know, she was on a concentrator, and I mean, it doesn't work without electricity, and there's quite a few of those, and they don't have any other alternative power other than what we give them, you know. And both these are on the same circuit where we can get them on at the same time as our water plant. You know, and that's another thing, as time goes on, your water plant's got to have electricity to pump water. You know, there's just a lot of things in your wells too. You know, you got a generator out there for your water plant, but you don't have them for your water wells. Without having outside power, with the circuits not being on, you can't feed them. We have one little generator that we can pull around and run one, you know, run one at a time, but then it needs to go to the sewer plant most generally because it's got to pump it out the same way it pumps it in, so.
If we update our system, what does it basically essentially do to that Cooper engine down there? Is it still usable with this system?
Yeah.
It's just all manually done. Right.
Yeah, if you were running it, you'd run it as a base load unit, meaning you'd set it at some, like putting a brick on the gas pedal and just let it run.
And that's the way we've run it for years. We just screw the synchronizer down on it to where we put the load on it we want and just leave it set there and
So
let
it would
run.
be more or less just
It's a base load engine.
And probably not run other than.
I don't know whether I can teach anybody to start it anymore or not. It's kind of a trick to start, but we're having a hard time finding parts.
Okay. What do
So
you think?
if we got these two, if we had 2 cats, somebody would still have to fire up the Cooper. I mean, those 2 cats, would they handle the town? They would handle the town.
Yeah, they'll take it even in the summertime. Yeah. That's the reason for sizing this one the way it was. That and the fact that it's easier to find an 1825 than it is another 1360 like the one we have. If we'd have put another 1360 in, it would have done about 80% of your days. But this way, you can, even on the hottest summer day, it'll take your total load. Those 2 engines will. Them 2 cats without ever starting that OP. Yeah, they will.
So you would probably say in the summertime, maybe go down there if we lost power and just start the OP to relieve some of the load or split it between the 3?
No, not unless I
I
had
mean, if it
to.
was getting too close to the point
Because
that
the
people-
Caterpillar's more efficient than that OP
Right.
is.
But if it was getting to the point that we were pushing the limit of what we could,
Oh, yeah, we could. There's only about 150 kW difference between that OP and what this Caterpillar is. I mean, there's not very much.
But you can put the bigger cat in the OP.
Oh, yeah, and have plenty of room,
Smaller
sure.
one.
And
That's
base
what-
load that OP the same way as what he was talking about with the Cooper. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do it once you have that other piece of the pie in there. So, and we wouldn't do anything different we do now. We still start it, and we still put them on, still warm them up and that stuff, you know, and load test them just like we do. I mean, they're still part of something that needs to be maintained. So, we don't just throw a towel over it and drive off. I wouldn't do that. I just wouldn't. But
But if something ever happened to that Cooper that we couldn't afford to repair it, we wouldn't be out, I mean, we could basically be
You
done
can
with
put a
it.
museum sign on it and leave it, yeah. And that may be where we're at right now. We haven't found all the parts yet that we need.
Well, that was my other thing. I mean, I know that we've been looking for parts for it.
Yeah.
It's one of them things that's harder to get parts for.
What this would basically do is give you, let me think, let me add this up real quick. 3.8, give you about 5.5 megawatts. And you have 3.2 in your summertime load. So it gives you quite a bit of breathing room. You know, and that's another thing, that $500 a month that you've been paying for, or that 500 kW, what have we been paying for it? A couple thousand, 3,000? That's still another 25 or 30 a year that you wouldn't be paying out anymore, you know? And that was the whole reason why when we did that contract with them, and I had this as a hindsight deal. I just said to them that day before we wrote that contract that we needed an escape clause in it. So that if we ever did want to get out of it, we wouldn't get charged for the full 10 years. And so they wrote it in there. So if you know, they can hold it up to a year, but after that they have to release it. And I don't think they'd be that way. They've been a whole lot easier to work with than that. But, you know, they get points, and they take our generation, it becomes their generation basically. And that's the way they get their points with SPP and those, as to how much they can produce, because they can call on all their cities that have engines that are viable, that can run 24 hours a day, and put them on against where they buy, you know, for what they buy for their power.
So is it possible that if we were to do this and Midwest said we need to buy energy from you, we could fire all three energies and
Sure, and push them back,
and push
sure.
them? Cover our load?
Yes.
And push back.
And push back everything else, yeah. We have to do that when we test now because we don't have enough room for it, so we push everything else back to them.
So at the end of 10 years when this contract comes up, is there any negotiating power with
There's always negotiating power as long as
knowing
you've got
that
it.
we can cover ours 100% plus give them
You're always in a
some?
better position when you
Yes.
cover your own load.
Yep, yep.
I mean, I probably won't be on city council in 10 years, but or at the end of that 10-year deal,
I
but
probably won't be here either, but hopefully the people behind you will see it that way, you know? I mean, it's been a great thing for the community to have it. You know, it's kept the school district going and that stuff, where maybe, you know, to me, that's a piece of the game if the time comes when you consolidate your schools. You know, you got one school in the district that doesn't have any way to do that, so kind of knocks you out right there. I mean, you know, it just gives you that extra revenue and that stuff too, but it gives you the flexibility to be able to say, well, Jamie can teach you how to start it too. I mean, you know, that OP, no, it's a different show. And I've done it several times for these guys, but it's just not something that you just pick up and run with. It takes a little bit of finesse. It's kind of like starting your granddad's old tractor. It might take a couple of moves that you just really didn't know were there. I mean, it's just one of them things. But the mechanicals are harder to start than the electronic ones. I mean, they just
It's
aren't.
the crank on the front.
Yeah, it's the crank on the front. Yeah. But everything's housed automated on those cats too, where it's not on that OP. That OP has coolant tower pumps, and it has, you know, it has a fuel day tank, stuff like that. Everything, it's another piece of the pie to make it work and to keep it working, you know, makeup water. I mean, there's just a lot of things. Where with these and radiators are self-contained. You don't have to worry about them, you know, unless you have a leak. You don't have anything to worry about. You don't have to worry about them in the wintertime. You don't have to drain them, you know, any of that stuff. I mean, they're start 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of advantages to it. Where now all our coolant tower water, like off of that OP, drains back inside so that it doesn't freeze. And then when we start it up, then we kick the pump on and we pump it back out in there. But you have icicles hanging off of it and everything else where you don't have that problem with radiators. So you have temperature problems with it the year round. I mean, it's just a different deal. But
It's a nice program.
Is it? Oh, boy. Okay, council, what do you want to do?
Some good information.
I don't know as I'm 100% ready to make a decision tonight.
And like I said, I just put that on there just in case, since it was the special meeting.
Right.
And the reason I brought these guys in is because I figured you'd have questions that, I can't answer that they can answer. I mean, they've been around enough that they can tell you what they've done different places and stuff like that. So,
I think it's something we need to look at, but I don't want to jump into it and end up like we did with the water plant out there that I think was a giant waste of money. I don't think this would be a waste of money, but I want to make sure we're making the right decision and spending our money wisely. I mean, that's how I feel. I've been down to the plant and I've talked to Stafford. Stafford's got, I don't know, 2.3 or $4 million in theirs, and I don't know if it's even right yet.
Different controls. Make sure everybody understands.
Yeah.
This is
and
not installed by
their
him.
operators
I didn't
last
sell the
days
cat
tomorrow.
engine either. So, that's
I just know they've had a lot of issues with
Yes.
theirs,
Yeah.
and their whole thing.
We'd be
And I
happy to
just,
give you a list of references too, if you was like that.
I know I don't know, it was last year when we were gonna go out to Johnston County and look at that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, we never have made it out there. We've tried several times and haven't been able to put it together.
Is there anything closer that has something like this to us that you guys, I mean, that you
Colby's
know?
not closer.
definitely not
It's
closer. I don't know, Ashland would be.
It doesn't have the automation.
Yeah, their gear was in before ours was. Because we went down and looked at it before we bought ours.
And it's not automated.
No, it's not automated. Everything we've done has been kind of out on the outer realm,
Yeah, we're getting ready to do it in Stockton. but
Stockton,
that's
which,
just as far. And we haven't done it yet.
I just didn't know, I mean, I'm not opposed to driving a day to go look at something, but
we did a big video shoot and marketing deal with it, so I could drop you the link to get, that would maybe help a little bit. Might save you a trip out there, you could see what you want to see on it. It covers a lot of the control side of things, mainly on my side, just because what he does is kind of black magic stuff anyway that most people aren't going to understand it anyway. So it'll give you the visual, you can see stuff.
Right.
He's pretty close.
Can't see it, but it always works.
He's pretty close, yeah.
Almost always.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's ever let the smoke out of it. It still works.
Well, I think if you could get that link to Jamie, she could forward it to the rest of council and myself, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you coming down here and giving us all the information. Thank you very much for that. And council, unless you've got anything else to talk about this evening, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
second.
I have a motion and a second on the table. Any more discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all very much.